Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. You best believe it's another episode of League Unlock. We are on that millennium song, and today flying on solo. Almost said Son Ho. Big shout out to him if you like a little bit of EDM music and you haven't heard me say that before. But today it's League Unlock, and today it is week 4 global power ranking action that we need to get through. And let me tell you right now from the get-go, not only did we have marquee matchups at the very tippity top of the table this week, but we had some serious shifting going on, not just within the top 10, but really from number 1 to number 20. And we're sticking with that theme of beginning at the top of that table, where we had the direct head-to-head between two of the top 3 teams, and now they sit alone in that top 2 zone. The first loss of the year. Of the split, not of the year, for KT Rolster as they went head-to-head against Hanwha Life. And yes, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, everybody around the planet, this is the Hanwha Life that we were promised to see, as they get a pretty darn convincing 2-0 over the what was undefeated KT Rolster. And really, top to bottom, you can talk about HLE performing at a high level. Perfect has been a guy we've been talking about in the conversation, at the very least, of best top laner in the league. And he was very quickly given a reality check by your boy Zeus, who still sits at the top of that mantle, even though Perfect got a pretty insane laning phase advantage on the Renekton in Game 2, which is, something that happens very often, but the Croc up top. Zeus, one-item Jax, comes back, gets a 3-man stun, completely takes over a couple of team fights. He was an absolute menace on the Yorick in the first game, and the synergy with Kanavi and really all 4 other members are hitting critical mass, as now they sit with the same record as KT, and this early game dominance, the impeccable laning phase out of HLE, earns them that top spot on the global power rankings for week 4. And it's not enough to bump KT out of the top 2. I mean, they were 2 last week, and you knew whoever was going to win this head-to-head early on in this week was probably going to claim that top spot, and it is Hanwha Life coming away with it. And we even got to see, Guma-Yushi. We still haven't seen that T1 level, but we also haven't seen this Guma play in playoffs in the most high-stakes marquee matchups on the Hanwha Life roster, which I can't wait to see, because, well, I think an 8-1 start has guaranteed HLE will not be finishing 10th place for back-to-back splits, and it's completely misconstrued. But how about going from a 10th place LCK team to number 1 on the global power rankings? HLE, all business on the Rift, and even though they got 2-0, KT still had some signs of life. They were definitely gapped on the day, but the body of work that they've put forth so far this split, absolutely more than enough to stay in number 2, especially when you look at what BLG and TES have done lately. And obviously, the top esports side of things, you'd have them ahead of BLG, if not getting crisp 0-2'd at the hands of Weibo Gaming. The ultimate dark horse frauds on the Rift, no business 2-0ing top esports, but they obviously do it, and that's why TES are in that 4th spot, and BLG exact same record at 6-2 now. But even with some wins for BLG, great, you 2-0 World Elite, but it's still the night show, and it's too much the night show. There's too many suspect individual mistakes from, well, especially Viper and Bin are the main 2 egregious in that word. I don't think egregious is even a word, but I'm going to go with it. If Knight wasn't playing at this level again, there'd be multiple more series losses that we would be talking about for BLG. There's a reason this guy just keeps racking up player of the games to lead the entire league, and nobody is making Annie look like an actual burst mage more than what Knight has been doing the last couple of weeks. And yes, like, when BLG wins, it's still dominant, and even when Bin has like a 0-4 start on Vayne, when he's actually able to open up in a straight-up 5v5, yes, it's a terrifying prospect to match up against his Vayne and other carry champions, but He's getting solo killed by, I don't want to say randoms, but people who would most likely be lower than him if you were to do an LPL top lane ranking, and just getting caught out all over the place. There's too many question marks on BLG to have them back in the top 2, especially with the level that KT and Homo Life have been. It was kind of a slow ramp up for a lot of these LCK squads in Split 2, but we're starting to see things come online, obviously, especially with those top 2, as we alluded to, and even a squad rounding out the top 5 now in Gen.G, who had another 2-0 weekend, and we finally, especially in the Nongshim game, we got to see that Gen.G of old that were just absolutely suffocating on the Rift, not giving up anything for free and completely controlling games from start to finish with like a 99% chance of dub on the Rift. So they're still not nearly the dominant force that we've been talking about Gen.G in years past, but it's slowly starting to ramp up as we get closer and closer to that playoff push. Again, I keep calling it playoffs in the LCK. It's technically just going to be the old school King of the Hill. You're going to see some teams play like a single best of 5, but it's still going to be MSI qualification on the line, and when things are at higher stakes, I expect Gen.G to be an even lethal or more lethal force on the Rift as we go expand, remove those yellow rectangles, and we see the rest of that top 10 around them. It's easy to see T1 and immediately want to throw them back into that top 5. And let me tell you, they're right there. They're hovering behind Gen.G. As, by the way, the last 3 matches in the LCK have all been T1, with their homestand getting done and then them kicking things off here against, similarly to what Gen.G did, a pretty convincing 2-0 against Nongshim. We get to see a little bit of this easy Hoon buff. The secret for Faker was actually not playing the Azir at all and picking the Akali into it, as we have one of the better series individually from Faker so far in Split 2, and a pretty solid series win for them against Nongshim. And obviously there was a bit of chaos in the homestand, but it's still 2-0, 2-0, 2-0 the last 3 series for T1 as both they and Gen.G start to ramp up. And now all of a sudden, when T1 and Gen.G are playing a little bit better, you're sweating big time if you're D plus Kia, because you already have the mountain of monsters that is KT and HLE at a combined 16-2. All of a sudden, 4 out of the 6 best teams in the league, in the world, are LCK, and they're starting to ramp up. We got to see Pays have a nice series and actually have a full comp drafted around him with the Kog'Maw. We know Kyria is one of the few supports who can actually thrive as kind of that Peel, Enchanter, Lulu type, and also, you know, what we saw over the weekend with some insane Alistair, Pike, Engage, carry type champion supports. We know this guy can play all sides of the coin. All sides? 2 sides of the coin when it comes to supports, and Owner had himself another rock solid series against Sponge, who we know can be one of the more, how should I put it, flaky, not reliable junglers in the LCK. And a quick note on Nongshim, by the way. Apparently, we already got this rumor. Mark and I talked about Diablo being benched to the Academy squad. Well, toxicity issues aside, either BNK really are fed up with him and haven't told other teams, because we got rumors that there's a potential 3-team trade being involved with Nongshim, BFX, and I can't even remember what the other team is, but the end result, I think it might have been Keyboon DRX. The end result is Diablo going over to Nongshim, and let me tell you, if he goes there, plays alongside some veterans who might keep him in line a little bit, you know, Lahed, Scout, and Kingen are either world champions or LCK champions who can kind of tell him, listen, kid, we know you got great mechanics, but step in line right now. That's an interesting thing to develop and monitor as we go on, as Nongshim, by the way, are in the midst of a 3-game losing streak, and we will get to them much later on this board, but that is some serious drama to be looking at there. As already alluded to, Gen.G and T1 both bump over D plus Kia, who took care of business, but Gen.G and T1 look like their war machines are revving up again. Then we get to the Western squads. Team Vitality didn't even play on the weekend, and they are bumped down a couple of spots. Of course, that's because Carmine Corp had the I'm not going to say immaculate. They went undefeated during that Blue Wall homestand, and it was only a matter of time. I feel like we just needed more games on the Rift. Even though they needed 3 games, or there was some shakiness for sure, they got the wins. They're still a perfect 6-0. More games meant they were eventually going to jump past Vitality, but still feel like they're evenly matched right now, and would love to get a rematch. We might have to wait until playoffs roll around for that, but Busio is 6 head and shoulders above any other support in EU right now. Kalist is the most reliable late game AD carry, as we've become oh so accustomed to. Kana had some unbelievable plays. Yike is the smite master, and even Yahoo, I think, is better than people were expecting. I think people kind of slotted that as a side grade at best for Vladdy, but what we've seen out of Vladdy on Fnatic, I mean, Yahoo might be an upgrade with what we're getting. By the way, I'm not taking in any of this EWC qualifier matchups that we've been getting in the LCS and LEC lately. Those are basically bona fide scrims that some people are co-streaming, so not really taking those into account. We're looking at only stage games, which is why also to finalize this board, you got Cloud9 bumping into that top 10. They've been hovering for the last couple of weeks, but as we kind of alluded to on that weekend recap, they had far and away the most dominant series of all the LCS squads over the weekend and have looked like the most dominant squad. Thanatos probably the front runner for MVP right now in the North American scene, and just, waiting for more of these marquee matchups in the LCS. Just like we were waiting for KC to play more games, the LCS is basically a waiting room for whenever any combination of Team Liquid, Lion Gaming, and Cloud9 are going to match up. Of course, Cloud9 already has under their belt that head-to-head rematch against Lion Gaming. So feeling pretty good about Cloud9. I would just love to see them actually tested more and not have squads like Shopify TPing in 1v4 and just making kind of boneheaded mistakes that are gifting Cloud9 the win. But for now, they are honored by being number 10 on that list. The other half of the board, there was also some major shakeups, and it's not just Western squads. It's specifically, I think, 2 LPL teams that we want to sit here and talk about, and that is the wake-up call finally coming for both JDG and Anyone's Legend. Starting to get a little bit of a win streak out of both of them, as it's 3 in a row now for AL, 4 in a row for JDG, which coincidentally are the 2 longest active win streaks in the LPL right now. Hongq has been smurfing in that mid lane impressively, probably because of quote-unquote voter fatigue. Won mid laner of the week last week, even though Knight should probably be winning that every week. Hongq has been fantastic, and I think pretty clearly the second best mid. Well, right there with Cream, probably. That's your easy top 3 in the LPL right now. But Gala and Vampire continue to level up. Zhaoju's a reliable top laner. And AL, it's the same story with AL as it's always been. And that is Tarzan playing well? Then they're a playoff team. Is Tarzan not playing well? Well, then they're bordering on, I'm not going to say bottom feeder, but mid-tier at best. Tarzan has had some bounce-back performances. Still feels like the team is a little bit too reliant on him, and we're still waiting for some more consistent carry performances out of Hope in the bot lane. That is still the main question mark and blank line that needs to be filled for me before I actually feel good about AL heading back towards the LPL playoffs. But at least a refreshing sign to see them, both of these squads, completely kind of flip the script. Remember, we were talking about both IG and NIP as kind of this third, fourth best team in the LPL, and we did not feel good about it. And now IG is kind of in an absolute free fall. Remember, they were 3-0. Well, they've lost 5 series in a row. And yeah, NIP had the head-to-heads against JDG and AL and were pretty clearly outmatched, even though they had some moments. NIP are still hanging tight on this board, but things are starting to kind of recover and become what we more expected them to be in the LPL, and does feel like this region will be at its best internationally and even domestically when that 3-4 team are AL and JDG, with the potential of even, with the loss to Weibo, Top Esports, unfortunately, might be. We're monitoring. I'm not putting them on the fraud watch, but we're kind of pulling down the glasses to take a look at them and be like, oh, really? Top Esports, eh? That's a familiar name internationally. So JDG and AL absolutely on the path to maybe at least contest or vie for that top status in the LPL, and I feel like they will be back within the top 10 in no time. Rest of this board, number 11, just outside of that top 10 to join the other big two in EU is Na'Vi, who, even though they got 2-0'd by KC, there was at least one game that was very competitive and could have easily made this series a 3-game set. We're still feeling good. Rylesh, amongst all the stacked junglers in the LEC, has and remains a treat to watch. Poby, he got a pentakill. That was fun. So Na'Vi, I just hope you don't disappoint in playoffs. I want them to prove that they can actually, vie against the bigger 3, now 4 if you want to throw in Vitality in the LEC. And those other LEC squads to talk about, by the way, Movistar Koi and G2. Now that KC just ripped 3 games over the weekend, or 3 series, over the weekend, you're sitting there, a 3-2 overall series record for those two, and we're waiting for the homestand to wrap things up for MKOI. Final week of the regular season, you have both G2, Movistar Koi, and even Carmine Corp again are going to be in that homestand. So seeing all 3 of those squads go head to head is obviously going to have the most massive of impacts when you're talking about these global power rankings right before playoffs roll in. So just waiting for that. Like, neither of these guys even played, and it's been so difficult to actually grade most of these LEC squads. Vitality, we already mentioned, got bumped down a couple of spots. They didn't even play. But T1, Gen.G are kind of leveling up, and Carmine Corp looked relatively good, so they got up that spot. MKOI and G2 got bumped up a spot this week, despite both not playing any games, and that's because the combination of Nongshim and IG and NIP kind of floundering back a little bit, either completely off the board if you're Invictus, or heavily down if you are NIP and Nongshim, who, as you saw, was barely holding onto that board. More on them in a minute. But Koi and G2, by the time playoffs roll around, I feel like both of them will probably be ahead of Na'Vi and maybe even contesting Vitality at this point. Although Vitality, I mean, they have 2 games left against some weaker teams. If they go 8-1, like, how can you punish them for that? But MKOI and G2 still feel like they will be part of that 3-headed LEC dragon. We just need to see how that homestand goes in Spain for the Movistar Koi boys. Then the 2 other LCS teams, not quite in the top 10, but you've got the undefeated Team Liquid, who have definitely not been as dominant as Cloud9. There's very few question marks with Cloud9 right now, other than choking come playoffs. There's still several question marks for Team Liquid. I thought Jose Dioto would be the main question mark, but he's been the consistent force for them. The bigger question mark is, and Mark and I have both talked about this, where is Quid? He needs to be the best mid laner in bottom, at least, North America for Team Liquid to really be in that contender status. That's why they brought the former MVP in here. Feel like the meta should be pretty decently suited for him. Things like Aurora, Yone, Silas are things that, I mean, Silas isn't super meta, but these are all picks we've seen him dominate on, and waiting for that to come through here in the spring season in the LCS. And Lion Gaming have tough team to grade. It was a bit of a slow start for them. They've still kind of, I don't want to say struggled, but haven't been as clean as you would have liked to have seen from the defending champs from the lock-in tournament. But they had a slow start last split as well before turning it on in playoffs. And the reality is, similar to the LEC, These schedules for the West are just a little bit brutal. You have like one series against Dignitas or Disguise that you're kind of grading on week to week. Not having at least 2 best of 3s is a little bit rough to really accurately be grading these squads, as now we're a month into the split and some of these teams have barely played double-digit games. Or haven't played double-digit games. So it's still very difficult to grade a lot of these LCS squads. But Lion, at least on the list this week, they were not there the week before. So growth out of them, and we're giving them a little bit more of their flowers for this one. And then rounding out the bottom of this board, it's still the perfect Team Secret Whales. So that is what? Carmine Corp, Team Liquid Cloud, 9 Secret Whales. Actually, so many undefeated teams still. I feel like we rarely have this many a month into the split, but 4-0 is a little bit less impressive. And Nongshim, again, in a bit of a free fall. Maybe Diablo will be the man to save them, as it was, basically 2 weeks ago. We were talking about them. Okay, are they the next man up alongside this level up that KT is seeing? Gen.G and T1 are struggling. We get the direct head-to-heads against both Gen.G and T1, and yes, this is not 2021, 2022 anymore as Scout comes. Scout wasn't even that bad, and we're still not going to be seeing Calyx for a while because Scout has been relatively good, but Nongshim as a whole, clearly not up to the test of either Gen.G or T1, which is why they are holding on to this top 20 list by a single fingernail, as now Gen.G is in the top 5 and T1 is knocking on that VIP door. So overall, things kind of leveling out to a more stable state in both the LPL and LCK. We had such chaos early on with the main contenders struggling out of the gate, but we're seeing these familiar faces get back into the top 10, get back into their winning ways, and finding that playoff form just in time for this, not just in time, still got like a month in most of these leagues to ramp up for that playoff push, as MSI qualification will be on the line, and there's extra pressure on the LCK, as of course it is in Korea this year. That is it today, though, for League Unlock and some more global power rankings. My name's Eric. Thank you all so much for supporting and hanging out with us as always.